The office of the EFCC chairman is arguably the least coveted of appointments, given how the tenure of past 5 chairmen in the history of the commission ended. Since its establishment in 2003, during the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo, every individual who has headed the anti-corruption agency left the establishment in a controversial way, usually with corruption allegations, the same corruption they were appointed to fight. The establishment of the commission and the appointment of Nuhu Ribadu as pioneer chairman of the agency in 2003 gave the impression that the Obasanjo administration had a strong conviction to rid the country of corruption and financial crimes. It was during his tenure that the former Inspector General of the Police Force, Tafa Balogun, was convicted, jailed, and made to return £150 million under a plea bargain. He was even promoted to the position of Assistant Inspector General of Police in April 2007. But 8 months later, Ribadu was shown the exit door, removed as EFCC chairman during the administration of President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua. He is now the NSA to President Tinubu, by the way. He was succeeded by Farida Waziri, who went after quite a number of former governors. 3 months after her appointment, the EFCC arrested Chibode George, a top politician here in Lagos. That was in August 2008. He was arraigned on a 163-count charge, after which he was found guilty and sentenced to jail for 30 months. But like her predecessors, in November 2011, President Jonathan sacked her, and she was replaced with Ibrahim Lamode. Waziri's appointment was reportedly terminated following an allegation the EFCC had been selective in its investigations. Let's talk about Mr. Lamode, who, having a smooth administration until when in 2015 the Senate alleged that $5 billion was missing in EFCC under his watch. That allegation was a huge one. The allegation was that he diverted ₦1 trillion of assets recovered by the anti-graft agency during his time as director of operations and later chairman. In November 2015, President Buhari sacked him, replaced him with Ibrahim Magu, and Magu became chairman. At the time, the expectations were high that the Buhari administration will fight corruption, and we also saw some unprecedented progress in that regard when in 3 years he recorded a total of 603 convictions. 603 Nigerians were on corruption charges. Over 500 billion naira was recovered, and for the first time in the history of the agency, judges and top military officers, including retired service chiefs, were prosecuted for corrupt enrichment. But his own controversial end as chairman of the agency came in July 2020. He was arrested by security operatives at the entrance of the Wuse 2 EFCC office in Abuja, and the following day he was suspended as EFCC chairman due to corruption allegations leveled against him. The last that we've seen after him was Abdurrashid Bawa, who stepped into the shoes at the age of 40, the youngest EFCC chairman in the history of the agency. Like his predecessors, Bawa had his share of corruption allegations. In September 2020, the trained EFCC investigator was accused of selling seized properties in Port Harcourt. By November 2022, a federal high court in Abuja had ordered him to be remanded for contempt for the EFCC's non-compliance with the court order. His leadership at the agency followed his predecessor's footsteps when on Wednesday, 14th of June this year, President Tinubu suspended him indefinitely over alleged abuse of office. It was taken in by the DSS for investigation, and it's been an amazing story, but that did not quite end well for all the previous 5 chairmen. Let's talk about the new EFCC leadership under the Tinubu administration and the agency's leadership track record. I'm joined now by legal practitioners Bosun Shifora and Libros Oshoma. Gentlemen, thank you for hearing all the story I had to tell. Let's begin with Mr. Oshifora. For those who believe in superstitions, there is enough reason to conclude that there is a curse accompanying the chairmanship of EFCC. Do you agree?
Somewhat, it's almost possible to believe so. And if you look at the trend, I mean, look at what you just reeled out to us. You could literally say that with every president comes a new EFCC chairman. And the way it works also is that with the new president, the succeeding EFCC chairman is almost taken out. And then the new president appoints a new one. That's literally what we have seen over time. So one tends to believe your position that there's some costs or there's something.
No, it's not my position, no, Mr. Ojifora.
well, what's forward? All right, but basically speaking, it's also understandable because if you look at the EFCC Act 2004, I mean, from the laws of federation, you see that it's very obvious. It says that the president shall appoint the EFCC chair, and other appointments also are subject to the president. And at the end of the day, they are confirmed by the Senate. But the person who holds the oath is actually the president. If you look at Section 3 of the same EFCC Act, it says that the chairman and members of the company, that they can be removed by the president. So as long as they are there at the instance of the president, it's a no-brainer that if you don't dance to the tune of whoever is the president, he has the liberty to take you out. And that's literally what we have seen. You may want to argue whichever way, but the trends are there and we have seen it happen over time. I mean, if you look at if you look at Bawa's case, we don't even know what became of him. We just saw a situation where certain accusations were levied against him. Since Ribadu up to Bawa, same pattern, same thing. They are taken out unceremoniously and another person is appointed and then life moves on. That's what we have seen with it. As for what they have done, I guess we'll get to that in the course of the day. But
indeed, we will. Let me hear Mr. Oshoma's point of view. You seem to have explored the political dimension, and I'll get back to you very shortly. But Mr. Oshoma, why have all the previous 5 chairmen suffered almost the same fate, particularly in the area of allegation of corruption?
Yeah, thank you, Nifemi. But I will not start this conversation without also first and foremost pointing out the requirements for appointing the chairman of EFCC. Section 2 of the EFCC Act says that it shall be either a serving or retired, government security personnel who is in the rank of Assistant Commissioner of Police or its equivalent, and who has served in such capacity in the last 15 years. I don't know if this current chairman that has just been appointed now meets that criteria. All we know is that he was a personal assistant to one of the chairmen and then subsequently became secretary. I don't know if cumulatively all of those years that he's been there, cumulatively we tally up to 15 years. That's one thing the government needs to consider. Because if you have a situation where the EFCC, ab initio, is an appointment of the chair, is running contrary to the provisions of the law, then certainly you're going to meet a booby trap in front. And then coming to the issue of why the chairman had consistently, fallen down like the seeds that were planted on the rocky soil, it is very easy and simple. All of the accusation, apart from Ribadu, all the accusation against previous chairman, it's one and the same thing only. That has to do with proceeds of crime. Proceeds of crime. If you look at the EFCC Act, it empowers the agency to investigate, prosecute, determine prosecution, prosecute, confiscate, forfeit, and then manage assets forfeited. Where the banana peel has consistently been is assets forfeited. The EFCC chairman is accountable to nobody. And so all accusation has always come in the form of, there were assets forfeited and the EFCC chairman cannot account for proceeds of those assets. Farida Waziri, Lamode was about 5 billion. Magu were properties in Abuja and environs that were linked to him in the form of assets forfeited that were shadily sold. What do you call it? Bawa, the same thing. There were even a press conference addressed by some persons on assets in Port Harcourt that were forfeited and that they were sold, in questionable circumstances. So what we should be looking at is why even even the previous the current Attorney General during the screening also made recommendation that EFCC should be unbundled. Also, people had proposed the fact that EFCC should be unbundled. The powers of managing assets should be taken away from EFCC. So that is the what do you call it, the black pool that had consistently corrupted the chairman. So if you have a chairman who is confiscating assets and at the same time managing the asset, it has nothing to do with the powers of the president to remove. If there are no accusations against anybody, the president will not just sit down unilaterally, sack an EFCC chairman. Once the accusations become so right, like in the case of Magu, they were even a panel was set up to investigate. Even this one, also a panel was constituted to investigate. So I think what we should do is we begin to look at those powers and how, there can be a divorce, between, asset management, prosecution, and asset forfeiture. Because absolute power, we all know, corrupt, absolutely. And that is one of the bane of all previous EFCC chairman. And if care is not taken,
I hear you, Mr. Shuma,
likely be
and I'm wondering
if
that in and of itself is not an indictment on the integrity of the men and women who have led that office. But you mentioned the legality of the new chairman, the EFCC chairman's work experience. We asked that question ourselves, and we got some legal interpretation that the provision of Section 2, Subsection 1 of the EFCC Act did not state the nature of experience that a person is required to possess. It's similar or alike for 15 years.
It did security.
Just a minute.
It said security.
Yes.
Not just experience. I have been taught to bar for close to 25 years. So you can't say now that my experience will cover that experience that Section 2 talks about. No, that section talks about experience in areas of security. And so we shouldn't gloss over it because every office is founded on the provisions of the law. And the moment you get it wrong, ab initio, you are going to be reacting instead of being proactive.
We're probably going to get back to this. The interpretation we are getting from the legal representation from the presidency is that Mr. Olukoyede satisfied every legal requirement to be appointed as EFCC chairman. But let's focus on our conversation for now. Be sure that we'll return to that shortly. Mr. Oshifowora, is there a sense to which there are appointments also, because you spoke to the issue of political allegiance to Mr. President and his party, how do you work, for instance, as EFCC chairman without paying attention to the no-go areas and also the untouchables, given the political circumstance with which you were appointed?
Well, by the provisions of the law and by the provisions, guiding the office, ideally the person is supposed to be neutral, is supposed to be dutiful, and is supposed to adhere to his calling and make sure that he discharges his duty without any fear or favor. But if you look at the trend, because it's one thing to be academic, it's another thing to actually look at what has happened. If you look at the trend, when Ribadu came on, it was, from certain quarters, certain persons, let me not say everybody, I say that with all sense of caution. Certain persons from certain quarters believe that the former president of Obasanjo actually used Ribadu to go after his political enemy. And we have seen that pan out with, successive heads of EFCC. And the same thing applied even up to the last person. So there's this thing, you can't divorce the head of the EFCC from the body language of the president. If the president says, this is how I'm going, and this is the anti-corruption agency, they definitely will kowtow whatever the president wants to do. So there's a tendency to now feel that this is the way these things are going. This person is dancing to the tune of the president, and different people will interpret it from different angles. So, but ideally, the person is supposed to be neutral. And when it comes to untouchables in the society, we have seen instances where the heads of EFCC attempted getting at some untouchables, and we saw the way they ended, saw the way they left unceremoniously. So that speaks to the fact that there are still certain persons that are covered in certain lights by certain persons in some quarters, which the heads may not be able to touch. And when they touch them, I mean, they may leave the office. So it's a very funny situation. And let's just hope that this time around things will change for the better. That's all I can say.
Well, counting on that, Mr. Oshoma, there's also the reality that as head of the anti-graft agency, you are probably fighting the powers that be. I know you talked about the fact that they have too much power, but does the office also, provide the powers and the protection they need under the law, if in any case they are being witch hunted?
Yeah, you find out that to a very large extent, they occupy office at the mercy of whoever the president is. And also, depending on the policies and body language of whoever the president is, that also will determine the zeal and the strength to fight, and then touch the untouchables. But like my colleague had said, ordinarily, being an EFCC chairman, there should be no-go area. If we truly want a strong, virile, and corruption-free society, there should be no untouchables, except those that are protected by the law. But a situation where people who are not protected by the law, can do anything and go scot-free, like you are a member of the ruling party, and once you get into the ruling party, you can do anything, and they tell you go and sin no more. And then you are deodorized in the words of Senator Shehu Sani. And then once you're a member of the opposition party, then insecticide is used on you. Then that can no longer be, a truly, fight against corruption, but a selective fight. And if a president truly also wants to fight corruption, there are provisions. You appoint the EFCC chairman, provided the EFCC chairman also is above board. And he has really said, he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. Situations where the EFCC chairman also has his hand deep in the cookie jar in the form of assets recovered, it becomes very easy to boot him out of office. But also, when you find people who have consistently remained above board and can bear to touch the untouchable. Look at somebody like Ribadu. Ribadu touched a lot of people that ordinarily the today EFCC will not be able to touch with a long pole. But till date, despite his ouster from office, he's still celebrated as one of the greatest EFCC chairmen that we have had since the inception of EFCC. Excuse me. So that's why for me, irrespective of the body language of Mr. President, whoever the EFCC chairman is, the first thing should be, he should be ready to rise above all of those, attractions of the office. Because, like we say, when you fight corruption, corruption is going to first and foremost try to entice you, and then before fighting back. So when they entice you and they are able to soak you in, it's almost easy. It becomes very easy for them to fight you back. So that's what we have seen consistently with EFCC chairman. But I think, like I said, the appointment, you need to check that again. The government need to check that and not, resort to conjecture. And then, lastly, there's need for us to tinker with the EFCC Act to remove that booby trap if we truly want to have chairmen that will be above board. Otherwise, it has become too enticing, considering the country we are in, for you to be an EFCC chairman and have all of these assets under your control and, not fall, not be enticed by just taking a small bread from it. So that's the challenge.
All right, let me just get both of your reaction on this before we go. Mr. Shifowora, it's the first time we're hearing about the resignation of Abdulrasheed Bawa. It came with the announcement of the president's appointee for the role. Some have asked, where's Mr. Bawa? He's neither been taken to court nor charged with any offense. Am I missing something?
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
All right. I must, truth be told, the way Bawa's case was handled was, for me, it's a low for this administration. I say that with all sense of responsibility because, and I think going forward also, the government needs to just adjust the way they do things because you cannot make someone the head of an institution like this, then you just drag him. See the way Ribadu was literally dragged out of, office. And the same thing for Bawa. He was invited by the DSS and nobody had anything, whether he was alive, whether he was dead. You don't handle things like this because at the end of the day, the next person who will come into that office will be very careful in certain regards. And that will mean that he won't be able to discharge his duties very well or to the letter. Now we are hearing Bawa resign. How he resigned, why he resigned, we don't know. But the way the whole thing was handled, it's a big low for this administration. And I think going forward, they need to correct things like that. If you really want the EFCC to be respected, then you have to treat the heads in proper manner and in decent manner, and not like some scumbag. So I think going forward, the government needs to work on this, and I think like Mr. Shoma said, they need to look into the act because if you start from the EFCC Act and you put everything in perspective, I think government itself won't be in a position to be able to mess them up the way they have done previously. So that's just my position.
We have to go in 1 minute. Mr. Shoma, do you have a contrary opinion?
No, I don't have a contrary opinion. In fact, let me use Obayagbo's word. I adopt his position, ipsissima verba. And I will just add that, seriously, what this means, the way till date, we don't know where Bawa is. If he has committed any offense, the law says he should be prosecuted. Nobody has presented him before the public or nobody has charged him to court. What you're indirectly telling those people that will subsequently head the agency is that there are certain persons who are untouchable, and or that, next time you should grab whatever you want to grab because someday you might just be dragged out of office. Magu was treated the same way, Bawa the same way. What's the guarantee that this new chairman also, when another government comes tomorrow, he will not be humiliated out of office also? Well, you don't treat agencies like that. Government is a continuum, especially when it is the same party. Although also I agree that some of these agencies, when they occupy office, they do not think the power is transient. But irrespective of whatever the powers they would have exhibited, it also does not make sense when you also decide to go low the way they have done. I think government should be more responsible and responsive than all of this petty way of ousting, chairmen of agencies, because it actually ridicules not just the agency, but the entire government generally.
All right, so the EFCC has a new chairman pending Senate confirmation. His name is Olu Koyede. Will he be able to finish his term without being shown the exit door like the previous 5 EFCC chairmen we've had? That's a big question, and we'll be here to report it all. Gentlemen, thank you for your contribution. Libros Oshoma, Bosino Shifowora, glad to have you on the program.